Today we are covering part of section 3.1 over Spanish Absolutism. As we have already learned, with the end of the medieval era and the collapse of the old feudal order in Europe during the Renaissance, European governments turned into strong, centralized states with monarchs gaining tremendous power. The rulers in countries like France and Spain became absolute monarchs, meaning the rulers had complete and total authority and power over their governments and the lives of their subjects. This means that absolute monarchs are not limited by a constitution like the government here in the United States is. They have complete authority to make all the laws, wage war, and administer justice. This time period of absolute monarchs fell roughly between 1550 and 1800. The picture shown here is the crown of Louis XV of France, created in 1722. I took this picture at the Louvre Museum in Paris 2 years ago. Monarchs, meaning kings and queens, used the theory of divine right to justify their absolute rule. Divine right is the belief that God gives a monarch their authority to rule, that monarchs are God's representatives on earth and therefore only answer to God, allowing them to command total obedience from their subjects. To defy your ruler was to defy the wishes of God. By 1700, absolute monarchs using divine right theory reigned over most of the great nations of Europe, with the notable exception of England, which we will talk about later in this unit. By the 1500s, Spain had emerged as a major European power. Through the marriage of Queen Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand II of Aragon, Spain had essentially been united in 1469. These monarchs were also the sponsors of Columbus and started a major phase of empire building in the New World, which would be carried on by their descendants, bringing enormous wealth to Spain. In 1516, Ferdinand and Isabella's grandson, Charles I, became the King of Spain. Then, in 1519, when his grandfather, Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian I, died, Charles became the heir to the Habsburg Empire, which included the German states of the Holy Roman Empire and the Dutch Netherlands. As the Habsburg ruler, Charles took the new title of Charles V. On this slide, you can see the kingdoms of Spain and the dates of their unification. Notably, the largest, Castile and Aragon, were united with the marriage of Ferdinand and Isabella. They then oversaw the conquering of Granada with their famous Reconquista, when they drove Muslims out of Spain and reclaimed the land for Catholicism. You should remember Holy Roman Emperor Charles V from Unit 1, when we learned about the Protestant Reformation and Martin Luther. As a devout Catholic, Charles V fought to suppress the spread of Lutheranism or Protestantism in the German states. After years of religious conflict and war, Charles V was forced to recognize the right of the German princes to choose either Lutheranism or Catholicism in the Peace of Augsburg, signed in 1555. As both the King of Spain and the Habsburg Holy Roman Emperor, Charles oversaw multiple wars against the Ottoman Empire and France. However, being the ruler of such a huge empire proved ineffective for one person, as he could not properly manage all of his enormous territory. Charles had declining health by the mid-1550s, suffering from severe gout due to poor diet, as well as an increasingly painful jaw deformity common in the Habsburg line due to inbreeding with close relatives. In 1556, Charles was exhausted from 40 years of robust rule and failing health, and he abdicated his throne. He retired to a monastery where he died 2 years later. When he abdicated, Charles divided his giant empire between his brother and his son. The Habsburg lands in Central Europe, the Holy Roman Empire, went to his brother Ferdinand, who was then anointed the Holy Roman Emperor. To his son Philip II, he gave Spain, the Netherlands, the Spanish-Italian states of Naples and Milan, and the huge overseas Spanish Empire in the Americas. You will remember Philip II of Spain from Unit 1. He reigned as Spain's king for 42 years, expanding Spanish influence and strengthening the Catholic Church. He ruled as an absolute monarch, enjoying total power. With Spain's American colonies and territories, the nation became exceedingly wealthy, with the influx of gold and silver from the Americas, making Spain a leading power in Europe. During his rule, Philip II fought many wars to advance Spanish Catholic power. Spain won a major victory against the Ottomans in 1571 under Philip's command. However, Spain continued to struggle against Protestant rebels trying to gain independence in the Netherlands. Once his sister-in-law, by the 1580s, Philip saw England's Queen Elizabeth I as a Protestant enemy. Elizabeth was helping Dutch Protestants rebel in the Netherlands against Spanish rule. She encouraged English captains to plunder Spanish treasure and loot Spain's cities in the Americas. To end England's interference in the Netherlands, and in an attempt to try and win back the English crown for the Catholic Church, Philip II sent a huge armada or fleet against England in 1588. The Spanish Armada consisted of 130 ships, 20,000 men, and 2,400 pieces of artillery. However, in the English Channel, the large Spanish ships were outmaneuvered by the lighter and faster English ships. In an unexpected victory, England destroyed the Spanish Armada, and with it, Spanish naval supremacy. Here is an infographic about the size of the English versus Spanish forces. Looking at the size of their forces, if Spain had successfully landed in England, their larger troop numbers would have quickly overwhelmed the English. The defeat of the Spanish Armada ended Philip's plans of an English invasion, and his continuously costly wars began draining the wealth out of Spain. The influx of treasure from the Americas led to Spain neglecting the development of its commerce and farming sectors, and they became overly reliant on American gold, leading to soaring inflation or the sharp rise in prices due to a sudden increase in money. To raise revenue, Spain began heavily taxing the middle class, which weakened royal support. As Spain's power began to decline in the 1600s to 1700s, the Dutch, English, and French began to surpass Spain's power both in Europe and around the world. Between 1550 and 1650, Spain had its golden century of the arts. Philip II was an enthusiastic patron of the arts, and also founded academies of science and mathematics in Spain. The most famous Spanish artist of the era was El Greco, a master of painting known for his religious scenes and portraits of Spanish nobility. One of Spain's most notable books was also written during this time period, Don Quixote, a comical tale which records the life of a man who imagines himself a knight. Driven crazy by reading too many tales of chivalry, he sets out to restore the old customs of Spain. Don Quixote is regarded by many to be the best Spanish novel ever written and one of the greatest literary works of Europe. On this last slide, there are pictures of El Greco's works, one of the most famous Spanish painters of all time.